And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm really, really honored to have in the studio with me both Norman Solomon and Phil Donahue, the great Phil Donahue. And gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Tom.
Thanks so much for being with us. Body of War, this new movie that did you help write this, Phil Donahue?
Well, it was my idea, and I am EP. I paid for the film.
Right.
And so I was sort of the, I was the gorilla in the room. But I had, obviously, a lot of help. And it was as much TV and, documentary things that I've hosted. It's the first time I've ever made a film, and it was quite an adventure. I called cold a woman in Texas who, thank God, recognized me. I said, I met this kid at Walter Reed, and I want to do a documentary, and would you meet me at the Kansas City airport? She did. We went to meet this young man, and she grabbed the idea with both hands and turned out to be a wonderful filmmaker. I was just very lucky in so many ways.
That is great. We're talking about the film Body of War, which is screening tonight here in Washington, D.C. at American University. And Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon, you guys are going to be there for this gig, right? So if those of you who are listening in the D.C. area, if you want to show up there, the Roots Action, it's co-sponsored by Roots Action, rootsaction.org. The website for the movie itself is bodyofwar.com. And tell us about the documentary. What is it? What is it?
It's the story of a 24-year-old Kansas City kid who saw the president on the pile with the megaphone.
Bush.
Mm-hmm. And, he wanted to get the evildoers too. Mm-hmm. So he goes directly to Fort Hood, signs up. He thought he was going to Afghanistan. He's in Iraq 5 days and an open truck. I think there were several soldiers in the back with him. The bullet came down and entered his collarbone here, exits T4 on the spine, which is between the shoulder blades. So Thomas Young is paralyzed from the nipples down. Wow. Thomas can't cough. 24-year-old Prima-Life male, impotent. And when I met him at Walter Reed, his mother explained his injury to me. And you look at this and think, people should see this. This is the most sanitized war of my lifetime.
Mm. Oh, Bush wouldn't even let us see coffins coming out.
And the whole press corps said, okay. Yeah. And I'm thinking, if you're going to send the young men and women, there's a hardly original thought, show the pain. We still haven't really seen the sacrifice. And what you see in our film is a drama that's playing itself out in thousands of homes in this country. Truly catastrophic injuries. Thomas will never walk, ever. Yeah. Since June of 2004, or April of 2004, he's been in bed. Right. He has since had a pulmonary embolism. He can't, he's fed through a tube. He's had a colostomy. And he's married to a fabulous woman who feeds him abdominally. And all the commercials on television are about food. Right. He cannot consume food orally. Wow. We've never been this close to a catastrophic injury in our lives, any of us. And it was a spiritual experience. And if I could just take 1 second, I wanted this to be a political film. I didn't want this to be, and he didn't either, oh lad, poor lad, how sad. Right. So what you see in this program as you watch him deal with his new body, you see the highlights of the Iraq War resolution debate in both houses of Congress. And what you see are members of the Senate and the House, like obedient third graders who were called to the White House by Karl Rove and the White House Iraq Group. Right. These are the advertising agency, right, the warriors. Right. They name our invasions. Shock and awe.
Yeah.
And they wrote a smoking gun will become a mushroom cloud. The longer we wait, the more dangerous he becomes. Saddam had more weapons of mass destruction than Hitler ever had. And they immediately go to the floor and read. It's unbelievable. This is the most shallow congressional debate that led to a massive blunder that we will deal with now for the rest of this century and beyond. It is unbelievable to see how nobody was thinking for themselves. And it was
other than Barbara Lee.
And Barbara Lee, and 23 senators, by the way, voted no. Yeah. 23. 77 senators. Hillary, John Kerry, our Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel.
Voted yes.
Voted
he was a
aye.
Republican then.
The only Republican to vote no was Lincoln Chafee of Vermont, and he was to lose his reelection bid. I'm pleased to know that he was elected as governor of Rhode Island. But I couldn't believe what I was watching, and I thought people should see this too. Yeah. So it's woven throughout. This is a very painful close-up look at what we mean when we say harm in harm's way. Right. And I said, Thomas, I can't do this without your permission. I want to see this. And he said, I agree with you. I want to do it too. Thank God. I didn't know what his politics were because he was whacked out at Walter Reed. I mean, sure. Morphine, you couldn't talk to him. And when I finally went to Kansas City and met him, I noticed on the card table there, he had a bumper sticker that said, Draft Republican. And I thought, wow, I have an anti-war warrior here.
Yeah.
And that was happenstance. I had no idea that's how it would turn out.
Yeah. Charlie Rangel has pointed out on this show more than once that not only do we not see the pain of war, but most Americans don't participate in the pain of war. And, calling for a national draft, national public, service program
right.
of some kind.
Right.
It seems that we have done such a good job over the last 20, 30 years of just making all this so remote. Like, we're not going to make that mistake we made in Vietnam again, mm-hmm. stirring up the young people.
Mm-hmm. And the language, our soldiers don't die, they fall.
Right.
Harm's way. What a quaint euphemism. We have women who've had their faces blown off by IEDs, sorry. It's just amazing how everything conspires to war.
Yeah.
You can't criticize it. It's not fair to the president.
Oh, there's money to be made. Norman Solomon is with us also. You are the co-founder of RootsAction.org, right?
Right?
You guys are sponsoring this tonight.
Yeah, last night we screened the film at a forum on war, whistleblowing, and independent journalism in Baltimore, and tonight, as you mentioned, at American University. I've seen the film Body of War about 6 times now, and when I watched it last night, by the end, I was in tears, and I think part of the reason for me and impact for a lot of other folks is that this is not only history. This is not only about a bogus debate 12 years ago. It's about the last few weeks. And you can just take a lot of the pro forma rote cliches from October of 2002 on the House and Senate floor. We were hearing them a couple of weeks ago for this next new war.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like it's being set up. I mean, it's actually, there may be multiple ones. We're looking at Ukraine, we're looking at Syria, Libya's falling apart, what's going on in Iraq, Afghanistan. It's just, the list goes on and on. We're here with Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon. We'll be back in just a moment. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The movie is Body of War. It's showing tonight at American University here in Washington, D.C. You can contact American University for more information on it. Show up. We're on the line waiting. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon. Phil Donahue, what do you see as the really existential crises that this nation are facing right now?
Well, I'm flattered that you would value my answer. We've become a warrior nation. We have no respect for diplomacy. Norman has reminded me that we spend $2 billion a day on things that go boom. We are also in a place now where we're feeling very, very tentative about our own selves as a nation. We haven't won a war, if that's ever possible. And it's almost as though we'd rather win a war than avoid one. And the more I thought about this, I began to realize how the motivation for wars pile up. You don't get a statue in a park for fixing health care. You only get a statue in a park for war. Yeah. That's why we have horses and swords.
That's true.
Children play on cannons in parks.
Right.
And we don't seem to... You can't get elected unless you're tough.
This is Hillary's dilemma back in, before the last election cycle.
We patronize Dennis Kucinich.
Yeah.
Peace. Oh, how nice.
Yeah, Department of Peace.
Also, we suffer from cynicism. Nobody wants war, is what they say.
Right. There's always a but after that.
But let's be realistic. What's the matter with you? So the more you surrender to this inevitability, the more inevitable war becomes, especially if you're spending $2 billion a day on the stuff to fight it.
Right.
And by the way, we're building billion-dollar aircraft carriers, and 2 guys with pressure cookers closed the city of Boston. 19 guys with box cutters brought us to our knees. And now the most cowardly instrument in the history of warfare, the drone. A guy sits in a padded chair that probably leans back for comfort, probably a coffee pot right over here, looks at a screen, and there they are. We're killing children.
Yeah. Well, and the flip side of that is, and this I thought was one of the most underreported stories, is that among the drone pilots, and these are guys who are in a quiet room in Kansas someplace.
Yeah.
Among drone pilots, we're seeing suicide rates now and
Really?
PTSD rates that are similar to those of people who've been in combat,
Really?
who have committed atrocities
Really?
and come home and commit suicide.
Really?
So, I mean, it's like, the war comes home. No matter how much we try to sanitize it, how much we try to pretend it's a video game, it's not killing them. People get it. It's an amazing thing. No drones. Yeah, we'll be back with Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon. Right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and in the studio with us, Norman Solomon and Phil Donahue. And Phil has produced this new film, Body of War, and it is playing tonight at American University, and you can also find it online, bodyofwar.com. And Norman Solomon with Roots Action. Right? .org, and co-sponsoring or sponsoring the gig tonight at American University, and you guys are traveling around. Sean. Hang on just a second. There we go. Sean in Lansing, Illinois. You had a question for Phil Donahue?
Well, no, actually, it wasn't so much a question. I just wanted to give homage to all of you gentlemen in the room. Phil, you got a raw deal at the TV station, man. I don't understand how they do these things, how they make these decisions. But you were one of the early ones against the war, and I think that affected you professionally. But what you guys are doing. And also, hello, Norman. You guys are doing a wonderful job. Tom, as always, man, you're just amazing to me, man. I don't know why you don't run for office, man. We need a president like you, like Bernie.
Sean, thanks for your kind words, and thanks for the opening to a discussion about the media. Phil, you famously lost the #1 rated show on MSNBC back when the Bush administration was ginning us up for war. How has, and we were in the first hour of our program, we had a couple of people on from the climate march in New York yesterday, which was not even mentioned on any of the network morning shows, was by and large ignored on the cable shows all day long. They were not showing, and this was in their backyard, literally 300, 400,000 people. And this morning, Morning Joe on MSNBC, the progressive network, although he's the conservative, would never even mentioned it, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah, and this is what Media Matters is reporting and what I'm seeing in a number of reports. I'm wondering if well, of course, all of these networks are making millions with these fracking ads, the wonders of fracking, and clean coal ads, and BP is here for America and all that. What are your thoughts on the state of media today?
Well, I think the thing that has to be remembered first and discussed first is corporate media. There's a group out there titled Media Reform, Young People, and their banner says corporate media is ruining democracy. When I was a reporter in Adrian, Michigan, 100 years ago, I had a Norelco tape recorder.
I started out in Lansing, Michigan.
Well, we must have covered the same murder at some time or another. I had vacuum tubes in like a suitcase in a Norelco tape recorder, and I was like 21. I must have looked 12, and I had my the call letter WABJ on my microphone, and I could stop the mayor. I couldn't get over how powerful I was, and I covered the births at City Hall and reported them, the births at M.L. Bixby Hospital. I played ball with the cops, for my sources, covered my first murder, covered City Hall. Today there is no WABJ. It was the proverbial 250-watt station. I didn't take a test to be a reporter. I didn't pee in a bottle. I just said I'm a reporter. And I was. You want it that way because that way you get a lot of people reporting. And if you have a lot of people reporting, somewhere in the center of this large crowd will be found the truth. Today, that center is occupied by 6 multinational corporations, which are much more interested in the price of their stock than they are in chasing maybe investigative journalism, which often goes nowhere. And also, they don't want to rock the boat. Big media is the boat. I worked for MSNBC, which is owned by General Electric. And I was popping off about Rumsfeld, who's their biggest customer. So, I'm sure that the white Republican members of the GE board of directors had very little patience for this gray-haired daytime talk show host knocking our country at a time when everybody was waving the flag, as a consultant told my boss, who called me in and said, "We just took a survey, and most people don't like you." So I was,
even though you got the best ratings on the network.
Well, right, and also that was a Republican consultant who made who created the focus group that they took on me. We could not have 2 liberal. We had to have 2 conservatives for every liberal. Right. This is interesting because it tells you how terrified. This is October 2002 was the date when I was on the air, one of the months. How terrified they were of opposing the war, of being thought of as liberal. We had to have 2. They wanted me to do celebrities, and they didn't know what to do with me. I'd already been hired, and they wondered why they had hired me. They didn't want to fire me. That's not a very good, that wouldn't necessarily flatter them. And so my producer would go down the hallway every morning, and they would look over our list, and the rule was I was considered 2 liberals. I mean, it seems silly now, but
And Michael Moore was 3 liberals, wasn't he?
probably
I remember the story.
Right.
Yeah.
The most hated man in the White House was Michael Moore. I've told him how jealous I was, that I didn't get that designation. But it was truly, and that Fox News belongs to a corporation that makes $1 billion a year profit. Think about that.
Wow. And their second largest stockholder is a Saudi. I mean, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know about in the coverage of Fox News of what's going on in the Middle East.
Right.
I think it's 7%. Prince Talaweed or whatever. Wow. Anyhow, we're here with Phil Donahue, Norman Solomon. We'll be back after this. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, and it is 28 minutes past the hour. The movie is Body of War. Tonight, it's at American University. You can find that information over at Google American University or whatever. Give them a call, right? And rootsaction.org/DC as well.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
Don't keep it. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting live on commercial radio stations from coast to coast on Sirius XM all across the North American continent, on Pacifica stations across America, Europe, and Africa, American Forces Radio on every U.S. military base in the world, and simulcast as TV on Dish Network, DirecTV, and cable systems nationwide through the Free Speech TV network. Pleased to have you with us, and pleased to have Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon in the studio with us. And they're here because tonight, here in Washington, D.C. at American University, and if you want to show up and see Phil Donahue and see Norman Solomon and watch this extraordinary movie, they're airing the documentary Body of War. The creator and host co-producer and co-director of this documentary is Phil Donahue, who's with us. And Norman Solomon is with us with rootsaction.org, which is one of the co-sponsors of this gig. So anything on the top of your heads you wanted to get to, or should we pick up some phone calls, or shall we see? Let's see where.
Very quickly,
yes, sir.
An extraordinary aspect of Body of War is it combines the human reality of what war does to so many people, the terrible destruction, and the political pollution of discourse on Capitol Hill. And usually people look at one or the other. Body of War combines it, and it's devastating.
Yeah. Okay. And hopefully fascinating and informative, because not everybody wants to show up to be devastated. So
very true. I mean, it's you can't. We didn't want to preach, and I kept it to an hour and 17 minutes because that is the length of March of the Penguins. Yeah. And I you can't ask them to take notes. This is not a take your girl to the movie. Yeah. And so that's why I hope it's compelling, I believe. But I'm hardly your most objective witness. We'll let the people who show up tonight make that decision.
The movie is Body of War tonight at American University in Washington, D.C. Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Anita. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. You have a question for Phil Donahue?
Yes. Hello, Phil. I admire you so much. I saw you speak when I was a kid back in the 80s in San Marcos, Texas. I'm sure you probably don't remember that, but I wanted to ask you a question about social media. I know you said back when you started out as a reporter that, if you said you're a reporter, you could report, and the best or all kinds of stuff would come out of that. And now, anybody can have a blog, or anybody with technology can be a reporter.
That is true.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it is a great hope. The media that you're watching me now on is the great hope for the future. We need media that is not. We need reporters who don't care if the White House calls them back. Right. We need programs like this that are not on a corporate nipple. We need media that comes from the ground up. We need media focused on people, not just the power elite. Today, elite media cover elite power. That's why you won't see Amy Goodman on Meet the Press. or Dennis Kucinich. And that's why, dissent is so difficult. It's so marginalized. It's not covered. Tom has already told me that the march yesterday in New York City on global warming was not covered. We're not interested in protesters. We want people who support America and are proud of America, and it's hurting this nation. We're standing mute as the Bill of Rights is being dismantled. I mean, my goodness, habeas corpus is gone. I mean, what's fundamental to you? You can have any kind of country you want. We can get a neo-Mussolini, and he'll tell us what's good for us, and we'll all, as we are now, stand mute and trust his judgment. Wow. The dissenters, the progressives, are the patriots. We don't think you should listen in on a person's phone call without judicial authorization. We don't think a man should be in a cage for 14 years without any Red Cross phone calls. But we don't think a president should be able to decide who he's going to assassinate without even leaving the Oval Office. And then the unmanned aerial vehicle goes and fires him while he's sitting in the right front seat of an automobile 5,000 miles away. This is not making us safer. The president's going to have to go to a church picnic in a Bradley armored vehicle. And we're all going to get naked to get on an airplane. And our children are going to wonder if they just got on the wrong bus or entered the wrong marathon. This is awful. We can't continue this. Imagine a drone fired from another country striking Ottumwa, Iowa. Imagine what this would do to us. I mean, everybody'd grab a stick and go after whatever. You think they're not responding the same way? We killed a wedding party. We bombed Grenada, for God's sake. Grenada. And hit a mental hospital doing it, by the way. It's a shame, really, and we have so much to sell. We have so much to be proud of. This is a fabulous Constitution. Really, in the history of civilization, there's been no document as insightful as this. And it's crumpling away like an old parchment. And the American people are standing there watching it happen. Mute.
Apropos of that First Amendment issue that Anita brought up, I have suggested for some time, Dianne Feinstein is saying, let's protect journalists, in quotes, which means that now it's up to government to decide who is and who isn't a journalist. And I have been saying all along, we need to protect acts of journalism, regardless of who
Well,
does
that's the
them.
point I'm trying to make with my Adrian, Michigan story.
Yeah.
Let's...
I didn't go to J school either. I was a reporter for 7 years.
It's a crucial point. Only authoritarian to totalitarian governments try to license journalists, and there must be no licensing of journalists, or it becomes a tool of government.
Yeah. Let's pick up some more calls here. John in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You had a question for Phil?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that we need media that has courage, and we have a lot of very spineless people in different media organizations, and even, things that you used to rely on, like I used to listen to public radio. A good example is the Climate March in Manhattan. They made a mention of that there was a large march. They didn't even, have the courage to say that there was which the Christian Science Monitor said was between 100,000 and 300,000 people. That's not a large march. That's huge. And it was one of the biggest in New York City in a long, long time.
John, your point?
Well, my point is that, Yeah, we just do, there just is not the courage out there in these different media organizations because either they're too afraid or they're bought out, and even public radio.
Let's get Phil and Norman's thoughts on this. It seems to me that in 1982, when Ronald Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act, and we saw this explosion of consolidation, these M&A artists, brand new job description on Wall Street, that now here we are 30, 35 years later, and every industry is dominated by between 3 and 7 companies.
Yes.
Every industry, including the media. That was one of the original sins.
I think so, too. And this point has to be made, Tom. I think all of us, myself most especially, have to be careful of barroom roundhouse generalizations. As regard to media, not everything sucks.
Yeah.
We have some real courageous stuff happening. To name one, and I've never met her, I don't know her, I don't know if she knows me. Arwa Damon for CNN has been in Iraq. She got the helmet, the flak jacket, and she has been telling us for several months now, Iraq is in chaos. And isn't it interesting? Many of the reporters from these very dangerous places are women, and they are to be respected. And they should. I hope there's Pulitzers down the road for them. And so it's important to say that there's, in spite of corporate media and the bias toward rah-rah, we definitely have become a mouthpiece. You know what? Think about this for a second. Every major metropolitan newspaper in this country supported the invasion of Iraq. Every major metropolitan newspaper in this country. I've said that several times on public forums, and I am offering, if I've overlooked somebody from a major metropolitan city newspaper, I am prepared to apologize to them publicly. I haven't heard a word.
Amazing. Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon in the studio with us. The movie is Body of War. It's playing tonight at American University here in Washington, D.C. The website, bodyofwar.com, and, of course, rootsaction.org/DC. Norman, one of the co-sponsors. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's American University tonight at, what time is it? 6:30. 6:30 tonight at American University. Thank you. We'll be back. Okay. Garland in Cortland, Ohio, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Satellite Network.
My call. Thank you.
Garland, you are on the air.
Phil Donahue and think he's held up very well, but I really don't agree with him on much of what he said, particularly the use of precision drones. But the question I had was, with us almost in a state of war, de facto, how can Congress in good conscience take such a break for elections when a lot of them either have no opposition at all or have no credible opposition? And the last thing is, on the timeline of the fall of the Roman Empire, where are we?
Interesting questions.
Yeah.
On the timeline, actually, I defer to Tom on that. He's such a great student of history. But, Congress is so engaged in running for re-election 24/7, 365 that sometimes it's moot whether they're in Washington or not.
Yeah. I think we're, if you've ever read Tacitus and Agricola, the history of the invasion of England that was written by the nephew, I think, or son-in-law of Caesar, and it was Thomas Jefferson's second favorite book. He wrote to his nephew, there are 3 books you must read: Paul de Rapin de Torras's History of England, which was the Whig history, Tacitus and Agricola, and I forget the third one. I've read them.
Probably the Bible.
Yeah, and no, it wasn't actually, but it's anyway. Phil, your thoughts on these issues?
Well, I wonder about, if all good things must come to an end, and all good things will. And we have to think about, are we so enamored with, we're running around the last remaining superpower. Exceptionalism. And we're beginning to look, it's kind of unbecoming, really. I mean, if we're exceptional, and I believe our Constitution is, but it's largely being ignored now. If we're exceptional, I think it's better if someone from another country says that about it. The longer somebody says, I am not a crook, the more you begin to wonder. And the longer we brag about ourselves, like the bully in the playground, I am the toughest, I am the best. It's unbecoming, especially a nation of, that is famous for the security of its own liberties and what it guarantees its people through the Constitution is just fabulous. What we've done, how the Constitution protects the powerless against the tyranny of the majority. All those things make me a very proud American. But I have to say, this is in many ways not the nation that my parents taught me to pledge my allegiance to.
We have changed in so many ways over the last, hugely over the last 35 years. I mean, the ravages of Reaganomics, the middle class being ripped apart, the insanity of war. Reagan thing. Well, let's have a nice little war. It worked for Maggie Thatcher, right? In the Falklands. Right. Let's do the same thing in Grenada. Right. And the only president that hasn't had a little war was Jimmy Carter. He was the only guy to have a war.
Well, he did try. Desert One was a remember the helicopters collided. But it's true. I agree. And he is largely marginalized now.
Yeah.
He's not at the top of our most.
Well, and I think to this question of, Congress taking a 7-week vacation, I believe that this is part of the plan to marginalize Obama by not allowing him any legislative victories at all. So they just leave town. Anyway, we'll continue the conversation in just a moment. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Norman Solomon and Phil Donahue with us. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Phil Donahue and Norman Solomon with us. The movie is Body of War, bodyofwar.com for more information on that. It's playing tonight, and Phil and Norman will be there at American University here in Washington, D.C. You can get more information also at rootsaction.org/DC. Phil, I'm curious. First of all, I got to tell you how intimidating it is to interview somebody who I have spent so many years watching you do these brilliant interviews. It's almost like sometimes you're reading people's minds. What was the moment in time, or was there one, when you went from being an entertainer or a reporter or a person in the media to being an activist?
Well, okay, I'm gonna give you very brief. You're asking me to talk about myself. That's a dangerous thing to do to a talk show host. I put Madeleine Murray O'Hair on my show for my first show because I knew she would draw a crowd, and we were in Dayton, Ohio, and there were no celebrities available to me. I couldn't do entertainment. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to get
She was the head of the Atheists.
Yeah, she got the Supremes to ban prayer in school. You shouldn't have a crucifix on the wall of a public school. We accept this now, but then she was the most hated woman in America, and the building fell in. People, there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no angels. I mean, it was, and everybody knew there was this program on in the morning. Our third program was a gay person, 1967. Nobody was out. And, of course, I was scared to death. People think I'm queer, which is what we called them when I went to high school. I went to high school with guys who wanted to beat up queers. I never wanted to beat up a queer, but I certainly didn't want to be with a queer. I mean, I went to Notre Dame, 16 years of education, Catholic. You don't come out of that. Catholics, the Christian church has done more to promote homophobia than most other institutions combined. And then we had another gay person on, and I began to, your wheels start to turn. Why do I feel this way? what is homophobia? How did I get it? And why do I have it? And if they don't choose, and nobody wakes up at 13 years old and said, I think I'll drive Dad crazy. I'm going to be gay. And all these subjects made me start to think that the world that was shaped for me in the 50s, I came to age in the 50s. America was good in all things, Eisenhower, Lend-Lease, the Marshall Plan. And then suddenly in the late 60s, I'm having a professor on from Ohio State who's saying, there isn't a professor at Ohio State who believes in this Vietnam War. And I couldn't believe it. And suddenly, are we going to lose a war? Are the Japanese taking over supremacy in automotive engineering? Somebody assassinated my president? And all this is happening. And I'm not in a sales program at a large retail company. I'm on the air with my name on it, with all these newsmakers talking to me, actually feminists, kids get too much mother and not enough father. And I'm thinking, holy cow, they're talking about me. So it spun me. And suddenly I realized that I had Chomsky on, Noam Chomsky. I said, what are you trying to say? And he looked right at me and he said, never, ever trust the state. And what? I mean, I'm raised with, America, World War II, Pearl Harbor, be proud. We defeated everybody. We defeated the Nazis. We got off the floor after Pearl Harbor. And brave. And I wore a little badge, a little pin when I was 6 that said, remember Pearl Harbor. And then suddenly I realized that, hey, thousands and thousands of young men and women have gone to war to protect our way of life, at the center of which is free speech. And if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And that there's nothing unpatriotic about using it. Remember, you don't walk on water, but you have a right to be heard. And there is no democracy without dissent. And suddenly, in many, many ways, I found myself in the minority. But I was also hosting some programs that, we did some shows that, after your haircut, you wouldn't leave the barbershop. You wanted to see this. Sure. Compelling. Because our ratings went through the roof. So this was an all-noble. This was a professional interest I had here.
Sure.
And we banged on a lot of doors, kicked a lot of big tires, a lot of sponsors canceled. But because we were in Dayton, freedom is another word for nothing left to lose. We had no place to go but up, and a general manager who hung in even though sponsors canceled. So in many ways, I was very, very lucky.
It was kind of the golden age of
talk radio.
Yeah,
yeah.
It certainly.
No,
certainly
it was
talk radio, and Alan Berg was still out there
Yep.
broadcasting out on the West Coast, or out in Denver, I guess it was, before he got machine gunned down in
Yeah.
the 70s, wasn't it? The late 70s.
It was in the 60s. I'm sure it must have been the 70s.
Yeah, I think, and radio kind of went silent for a while, and then Limbaugh pops up in 87. Anyway, we're out of time. It is such an honor to have both of you guys with us today. Norman Solomon, rootsaction.org, Phil Donahue. Tonight we'll be at American University. Rootsaction.org has the information. Also, the movie, of course, Body of War, bodyofwar.com. You can check it out. Phil Donahue, it's an honor to have you with us.
Pleasure, Tom.
Thank you
very
so much for dropping by today. And Norman, it's always wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.